Hi, it's your $2 Tuesday movie critic here today, and I'm going to be reviewing the movie San Andreas. I know it's been out for a while, but I hadn't really got a chance to see it, and, I wanted to give my 2 cents about what I thought. Finally got a chance to see it, and I have to say, I was a bit disappointed. And let me start off with my full disclosure. I really don't like natural disaster movies, and I seldom ever go see them at the movie theater. The last natural disaster movie that I actually saw at the movie theater was The Perfect Storm, that starred Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney. So if that gives you any basis for my likability for natural disaster movies. I mean, the main reason I don't like them is it's man versus nature, and nature is always going to win. And usually, nature is fighting against man because man has done something totally dumb to cause it, or, over time, nature has finally said enough is enough. I'm going to let you know, hey, what you are doing right now, or what you did in the past, is finally catching up with you. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of natural disaster movies. I, have been in a couple of natural disasters myself. Thankfully, they have never been anywhere near close to the damage that was going on in San Andreas, which I've seen a couple of the shows that have talked about if this could really happen, and most of them say, yes, the San Andreas fault line will eventually one day crack, but not to the degree that it happened in the movie, which is a good thing. The fact that it could crack makes me nervous. It makes me feel very fortunate that I don't live in the California area, and makes me worry a bit for those people that do. But let's get back to the movie. So the San Andreas movie stars Dwayne Johnson, Carla Gugino, Alexandria Daddario, and I'm sure I messed up those two ladies' names, and I really apologize, and Paul Giamatti, who I love in movies. He's so cool. So, Dwayne Johnson, of course, is Ray. He's the star of the movie. He's the man that's not only a father, he's also part of the LA Fire Department and a search and rescue helicopter pilot. So, he does a lot for the city of Los Angeles. And in this case, you get to see that at the beginning of the movie, but when it really counts, during this huge natural disaster, the only people that Ray is focused on is his family. And pretty much, that's the only people he helps, which I have a problem with. And this is another thing that bothers me about natural disaster movies, is that normally it focuses on a group, whether it's a family or, like in San Andreas, or it's a group of people. So it follows those people. At the same time, there's nothing that they really don't talk about the other people or how the natural disaster has affected other people or the city that is involved in this or the area that's involved in this. And if you know some that do a good job with that, let me know, because I don't know of any, honestly, except the one that I'm going to talk about today when I talk about the two other old school movies. One of my old school movies actually does do a good job of that. But let's get back to San Andreas. So, Ray is, a divorced man, and he's in charge of the search and rescue. As far as I know, he's the one that's in charge of the search and rescue as far as the helicopter division, because that's the way it looks, at least at the beginning of the movie. And you get to see how well he does his job, which, hey, it's The Rock, so what are you going to expect? And honestly, I tell you what, that's the only reason that I went to see this movie in the first place, was because Dwayne Johnson is in it. Things I didn't like about this movie. I didn't like the fact that, like I said, he's this search and rescue helicopter pilot, and he's also a Los Angeles Fire Department member, but he, when it comes down to it, and when there is this natural disaster, he spends his time helping his wife and trying to find his daughter in this. And yeah, of course, any parent will want to do that, but he is supposed to be helping the public. And he works with other people. They don't even show these other people helping, people in the city or anything. Yeah, you see stuff in the background where, you see your very police officers doing things, But for the most part, no one really accomplishes anything but Ray, you know. And that bothers me. And then it's the whole cliche thing with the natural disaster movies. So I find it very irritating. I also find it very irritating that usually the only people that survive these natural disasters are white people. And the only people that are in charge that are doing a good thing are the women in general. That bothers me too. I don't like that. That's very cliche in movies. I mean, hello, I'm sure there are fully capable women on the force of the LAPD and also the fire department and the search and rescue that can help with this mission. But if you see them in passing, yeah, maybe. And it is so brief, you miss it. And, other than that, you don't really see them. Unless they're like the wild person, like in other movies, that are just out trying to show the guys, hey, I can be part of the group or whatever. But they're never really in charge, So that bothers me about natural disaster movies. And again, I do not watch them. I have not watched a lot of natural disaster movies. I found this movie to be just the same as most natural disaster movies. Very cliche. The man saves the day. Most of the people that are saved, or the majority, are white people. You do, however, and I will give them this point, they do have a representative of different races appearing, and it's only just one. You have the one Asian person, unfortunately, the main guy at the beginning, you have an Indian woman, you have, I think, a couple of Hispanic people, you have this one black woman that has a line. Good for her. And it's just so ridiculous. And I'm like, hello, people. This is Los Angeles. I've been to LA before, and I've seen different races represented. And I have to say that most of them have been Latino. And I did not see a multitude of Latinos in this movie unless, per se, they just looked white. And if that's the case, then I apologize for my mistake. And if that's the case, I still don't think it's right. I think that if you're going to do representation of a city in a disaster, you need to do a representation, a more realistic representation. Not just of, the people of that population, but also the natural disaster itself. Yeah, they said have a natural disaster, and I love Paul Giamatti's role in this movie. I actually loved his role better than Rock's because it was more realistic. He was the one, in all essence, that kind of saved a lot of people. Because, let's face it, when a natural disaster happens, there's no way to stop it. It's only people that try to come around and help others, that try to, tell you this is what's going to happen, try to keep the deaths, the fatalities, the injuries down to a minimum. And even, the property damage, which rarely ever happens. I've seen enough natural disasters on television to know. So you just hope and pray the people are okay, and then they can rebuild. So this movie didn't do it for me. I like the action. I'm a big action buff, so I do like the action. And, and there was a lot of that going on. It was not lacking for action. If you're going to see a Dwayne Johnson movie, it's going to be action. So, hey, that was not lacking. So I did like that part. I was entertained. But I was disappointed that it was still very cliche. There was nothing new as far as the natural disaster genre of movies for me. Final recommendation. For parents, there was a lot of cursing, but not, I wouldn't call it salacious. It was pretty much warranted. These people were in actual natural disaster situations. So sometimes a person is going to let out a 4-letter word out of frustration. And that's most of the times when you see it. That's what happens. And most of the time I have to say it was the S word. So And that was the main word that I heard, a lot of cursing. The movie is rated PG-13. There is no nudity. There is no, drug use, or any of that crazy stuff, or be a different rating. It is a cool movie to watch with your tweens and stuff. Even the younger kids, just be aware there are curse words in it. And, you hopefully one of those parents that says just because you hear it doesn't mean you can say it too. And I think the kids will enjoy it. There is a little romance going on, but it gets to the point of just some kissing, and that's it. There's not even a hint of nudity. I have to say, they do also have a cliche thing with the girl with the big breasts walking around in the tightest shirt possible, showing cleavage. And it wasn't as in your face as it normally is in action and horror movies, but it was there. I think Paul Giamatti had a lot more to do with saving the day, but that's neither here nor there. And also, the news reporter that helped Paul Giamatti, because Paul Giamatti plays a scientist in this movie that has exposed the fact that they have a way of detecting earthquakes before they happen, because we know in real life that's impossible. And no seismologists, those are scientists that study earthquakes in real life, are trying to find ways to do that, to detect earthquakes before they happen. And even, I've experienced, not an earthquake, thank God, but I have experienced a tremor. And that was enough for me to say, hey, I got to get out of California altogether. And I was within a year. Because that, feeling the earth move, that is something that I don't think anybody is prepared to feel. And when you feel it, to me, and my baby at the time, I had my baby at the time, my four-legged furry baby, that was like one of the scariest things I've ever felt, because there's nothing you can do about it. The earth is moving. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just try and stay in a safe place together and wait for it to stop. Now, the two old school movies that I want to compare to San Andreas is the first that was done, called The Earthquake, and it was actually in the movie theaters back in 1974. And also, this other movie is Aftershock, Earthquake in New York City. And that was a television movie, and I actually think it was a very original idea. But let's get back to Earthquake. This was, like I said, in the movie theaters. This was done back in 1974. The movie is rated PG, and it was actually a pretty good movie. I don't think there was any cursing in it. I didn't hear any. This was done in 1974 in PG, and PG back then was really PG. Whereas, PG, PG-13, sometimes they have a little curve to them. I don't remember hearing any cursing, except for maybe a couple of maggots, the other version of that. But other than that, yeah, I didn't hear very much cursing at all. There was a little bit of, not necessarily sex going on. There was just maybe innuendos of it, but there was no nudity. There was a scene that was a bit racy. It had to do more with an assault, though, than an actual romance. So that one, yeah, that kind of was actually pretty scary. So this one, I think it did a better job of a natural disaster, because it just didn't look at one group or one family or whatever. It looked at different people and how the earthquake affected them. This also happened. This movie takes place in Los Angeles, California. And it is, in the movie, it's supposed to be the worst earthquake in American history. And it winds up destroying the city of Los Angeles and a lot of people in it. It is more realistic than San Andreas, by far, no doubt. And it's not because of the special effects. Now, of course, San Andreas had better special effects. In some scenes of earthquake, you can actually see where they're just shaking the camera. And, the acting was good in both movies. The thing that made it more realistic, like I said, was because it showed how this earthquake affected the entire city, and showed how it affected more than just one group. It showed different groups. There was a married couple. There was this guy that was a stunt motorcyclist. It also showed how it affected this National Guard group, and one National Guard member in particular, which at the beginning of the movie he works in a store, and he's a store manager. And then as the movie progresses, you see that he's not only that, he's also a member of the National Guard. You gotta see this guy's acting chops to believe it. I mean, he just comes off as, in the beginning, he was creepy to me, but I think he wasn't supposed to come off creepy in the beginning. But, you know, he does to me, as the things that he does. He kind of has interactions with the stunt motorcyclist manager's sister. If that makes sense. Now, the person that I really liked in this movie was George Kennedy, who plays Lou, the street cop. And he does an excellent job. You see him from the beginning of the end of to the end of the movie, and you see how he transitions from, you know, a cop that's just fed up with the way the system works to being a part of, you know, seeing this huge natural disaster take place and saying, hey, you know, we got to help each other, you know, through this, and then really standing up and taking, you know, action. Now, of course, like most natural disaster movies, this movie also had its cliche moments where, just like in San Andreas, the guys are the ones who save the day. The National Guard is only guys. The police force is only guys. The women are pretty much just like, oh, help me. I cannot do this by myself. And the guys, you know, being the stoic, you know, individuals saving the day. Now, there are different races kind of like represented in this movie, but for the most part, as the movie progresses, all you see is white people again. And this is, again, Los Angeles, so I really didn't expect this. But this is Los Angeles back in 1974, so maybe that was what was there at that time. And then again with the guy that ends up showing his true colors in the end, you know, I was surprised. I'm not necessarily surprised at what he did, but at how far he took it, and that he didn't come back from it. And that's another thing that you both see in San Andreas and in this movie, how the community either takes one step where they try and help each other and they try to look out for each other, or they become looters and it's one for every person for themselves, and they're breaking into stores and stealing, you know, and taking whatever they can. I think it's more of an extreme in San Andreas than it is in Earthquake, but it's still there. Now, this movie has a pretty much all-star cast, but at the time, I think Charlton Heston and Ava Gardner were really the stars of this movie, and they were the big stars at that time. Charlton Heston plays a businessman. Ava Gardner is his wife. George Kennedy, like I said, Lou, the police officer, he is my favorite character in the movie. Lorne Green, who plays Sam, the father-in-law of Charlton Heston's character, Stuart Grass. And you have Ava Gardner, who said she plays Remy, the wife of Stuart Grass. And you have Richard Roundtree, who is Miles Quaid. He is the stunt bike driver. And, you know, he does, you know, you get to see him do one stunt in the movie. Pretty cool stunt, actually, for the time period. But, I think they just put him in this movie because at the time, Richard Roundtree was an up-and-coming star. I don't think he was really a star then. I don't know if Shaft had come out or then. There were a lot of other characters in here that if you go back and you look at this movie, you're like, oh, hey, I know him. Like, oh my God, but he plays the drunk in the movie. And he is hilarious. But I think this was his first movie role because when you look at the ending of the movie when they're showing the list of characters and stuff, his name is not the same as it is now. Walter Matthau, from Grumpy Old Men. His name is something totally different, and I don't know if it's Greek or Jewish, but it is a long name that I could not even try to pronounce. And I, rented it for a couple of days so I could watch it. And you can buy the movie if you want to, but I couldn't find anywhere to watch it free. So I was disappointed about that. But what you gonna do? So this was a good movie as far as showing some realistic signs of that. But if you're looking, if you don't want to see all the cheesy special effects and stuff, this is not the movie for you. So there were a lot of cheesy special effects. Now there were some good special effects as well, especially when they took a long-range view of the earthquake and how it was damaging, the city and stuff like that. Those were good. But when they tried to do up-close scenes with that, like the elevator scene, oh my gosh, that was the worst scene possible. It was so awful. And then some of the things where they get up close to show the people and how they're affected, and you can see the camera just shaking, and you're like, really, dude? The camera's shaking. But again, you have to remember, this is 1974. A lot of the cinematography effects, special effects that they have today weren't even around back then. And some of the stuff was done with one handheld camera. So give them a break. And I did. And I actually ended up liking the movie. Now, the absolute best movie that I have seen is Aftershock, Earthquake in New York City. Now, this is a television movie. This was never on the big screen, and it came out in 1999. It stars Tom Skerritt as Chief O'Hearn, Sharon Lawrence as Dory. This is in the, she's not part of his family. They never meet. She never knows him. He never knows her. Charles S. Dutton as the mayor, Mayor Lincoln of the town of New York City. Now, or the city of New York City. Now, the mayor, at the beginning, the mayor and Chief O'Hearn, who is the basically in charge of the police and the fire department, they're at odds. And the sheriff, or rather the chief, is actually given in his resignation prior to the natural disaster happening. And then there's Lisa Nicole Carson, who plays the daughter of the mayor, and Cicely Tyson, who is Emily Lincoln, and she is the mayor's mother, and Jennifer Garner, who's actually also very good in this movie too. Now these people all represent, again, different dynamics. You have a family, which is Sharon Lawrence, Dory's family in this movie, and then you also have the mayor and his family, and you have the sheriff, and he has a daughter in this movie, and he's divorced from his wife, which shows up somewhere at the latter part of the movie. And you have the other people that end up showing up, but I loved it for that, because, and then some people that don't even have a name in the movie but end up being a part of this natural disaster. And then I love that they had different representations of people in this movie, of races. And I love that it wasn't just the guys that were saving the day. There were other, Dory, I mean, she really, that woman, she really stepped up. And there's a huge backstory prior to the movie starting, where you get to find out how much she steps up, to help, her family. Now, Cicely Tyson's character, on the other hand, she, to me, is what I guess a lot of people feel about Meryl Streep. I'm not one of those people. I didn't really see her in a lot of stuff, so I don't necessarily think she's one of the greatest actresses ever, but I do like some of her stuff. But I do feel like Cicely Tyson is one of the greatest actresses ever. I think she can do anything, honestly. And, I love to see her in a movie. If I see she's in a movie, I want to see that movie to see what she does, because I know it's going to be dynamic. And I think because she's in the movie, it's going to be even more dynamic. And she did. And she actually had a small supporting role, but what she did with it was great. And I expected nothing less from Cicely Tyson. I mean, really, it's Cicely Tyson. So I love that. So I really enjoyed that part of the movie. I love seeing her there. And I love how they looked at not the damage of the city of New York and how it was damaged the thing that bothered me about this movie is that unlike San Andreas and unlike Earthquake, they never said what caused this earthquake. They never said how, what even stopped the earthquake. They just, this is in New York City. This is on the East Coast. Not just the East Coast, but Northeast. And it's like, earthquakes don't happen on the East Coast. And, if there had been a tsunami or something, yeah, I could see that. Then I'm sure, that's where the people that did this movie were coming from. Let's do something original. We know earthquakes happening on the West Coast all the time. But what if what happened on, and I'm thinking that's cool, but at least let the, people watching the movie know. No one ever asked the question, what causes earthquake? I was expecting someone to at least ask the question, but no one asked the question at all. So I'm like, really? So, yeah, that bothered me. And then they did, and I love this about this movie, but it was kind of crazy too. After, the whole earthquake happened, which I think was very realistic how they did it and everything like that, unlike the other two, unlike San Andreas. Then they come back and they go at the aftermath of the earthquake, and then a year later, and they brought some of the characters back so you can see, what happened to them, and I really like that part because I really liked Jennifer Garner's, story, how she meets this guy and how they help each other. It's not just him, looking out for the poor for a woman. It's them helping each other to survive this earthquake, and also looking at how this earthquake affects other people. I think that's what their characters were there to do, kind of like not only talk about how their earthquake affected them, but how it affected other people in the city, and I thought they did a real good job with that, and also realistically, people died that had storylines in this movie. Some people survived. Some people were hurt, some people were not, and I appreciated that because in real life, realistic. You take realism to a certain degree in a movie, for me anyway. I don't think you should take it to the degree where you're like, I watched this whole movie and this is what I get, kind of, but you kind of like, you don't want, in a natural disaster, not everybody's going to have a happy ending, and so you're prepared for that in there, and that's exactly what happened in this movie. If to ever choose a natural disaster movie, my favorite, this one would be it. Because it was done so well, and the characters were, well-rounded. There were some things where I had wanted to see how some of the characters that were in the movie, you didn't get to see what happened to them, later on, like the boy that was there with, Cicely Tyson, who's known to everyone now as Ray J, as at the time was Raymond Norwood, and and he did a really great job in this movie too, but I think it reflected off the job that Cicely Tyson did, and how, again, realistically, done very realistically and done very well. So I appreciated that. I really love this movie, and if I had to recommend any movie, it would be, out of the three, it would be this one. I rented this one off, rented from Amazon.com, this movie, and, I enjoyed it. It's like a rent, I think, for 30 days or so, and you can buy it, too. You can buy it if you like, and it's a great movie. If you like natural disaster movies, I think you'll really love this one, and you get to see how different it is from most of them, where it has that realistic edge to it, and the special effects was great. Oh yeah, another thing that bugged me about this movie though was the fact that, 1 year later the city was built back up. Like, really, New York? It's not going to be rebuilt in its entirety in a year. So yeah, they took the realism off the chart when they did that part. But still, it was a great movie and I really enjoyed it. So that is my critique for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you know any other movies that can better compare to San Andreas, let me know at the bottom of the screen, and I'll see you next time.